Chapter 9 A Growing Menagerie. The next day, Fritz and I went alone to get our sledge back from Calabash Wood, and with it all the utensils we'd made. As part of this trip, I wanted to explore the chain of cliffs and rocky hills that cut our coast plain off from whatever lay beyond them. I wanted to know if there was a passage through this barrier. If there were, we would someday be able to explore the unknown region beyond. If not, we were hemmed in by the cliffs on one side and the ocean on the other. The sledge was quite safe where we had left it. I was pleased that we had made good time. This meant that we could search for a way through the cliffs and hills, the key to discovering what lay inland. We advanced through meadows of manioc and potatoes and many unknown plants. The view all around us was open and pleasant. We came upon some bushes with small, waxy white berries. Fritz, I think these are wax myrtles. If so, we might be able to melt the wax out of the berries to make candles. The wax wouldn't be perfect, but it would burn cleanly and smell pleasant. We filled a large canvas bag with berries and then pressed on. Very soon we met with another natural curiosity, a large cluster of birds' nests in a tree. So close together, they were like one huge nest. In and out of holes darted hundreds of grosbeaks, medium-sized birds, brown, chattery, easy to identify from their distinctive short, thick beaks. A few beautiful little parrots also flew in and out. Fritz wished to try to catch a young bird. I agreed, for he was an excellent climber. I also felt that a pet bird would help him learn to be more humane, for captive birds will not stand any rough treatment at all. The birds evidently did not agree with the value of his idea, for every time he put his hand into a hole, he pulled it back with a sharp beak nip. Finally, he reached in and caught the shrieking bird. He slipped it into his pocket and buttoned the flap. He climbed down as fast as he could to escape the dozens of birds diving at him, pecking and shrieking. When he reached the ground, the protest ended and he examined his capture, a bright green parrot. "I want to tame him and teach him to talk, father," he said. "All right, son, but for now, best keep him in your pocket. You already learned how sharp that beak is." We continued on our way until we reached a grove of tall, broad-leafed trees bearing fig-like fruit. We tried this, but found it sour and bitter. As Franz spat his out, he saw some gummy resin seeping from the bark. "Remember how we collected sap from cherry trees back home, father, and molded it into shapes?" asked he, scraping some off. He tried to knead it, but it sprang back to its original size. He tried to stretch it, same result. "Look, father," he examined. "Could this be India rubber? Let me see." "That would be valuable indeed, and I think you're exactly right." "How could we use it, father?" he asked. "I've only seen it used to erase pencil marks." "We would need to tap trees with a machete. When the rubber is fresh, it will flow thickly. It can be molded into different shapes. Once it hardens, it keeps that shape. Wouldn't it be nice to have rubber boots and shoes?" I asked. "Yes," he exclaimed as we continued on. Soon we reached the coconut wood with the bay beyond leading to Cape Disappointment. Among the coconuts were a few smaller palms, one of which was broken by wind. Its inner core was a soft, creamy pith full of fat worms. I knew of one such tree, the sago palm, which is often infested with the sago beetle. These were the larvae of the beetles. In the West Indies, these are considered a delicacy. Shall we try some? "Eat worms? If you say so, father," answered Fritz uncertainly. I made a roasting spit and impaled half a dozen and then salted them and built a little fire. We could put some potatoes on to cook. Soon a rich fat began to drip from the worms, and they smelled so good that it was easy to forget what they were. When the potatoes were done, I boldly put a worm on one and then took a bite and swallowed. It was delicious. Fritz did the same. The larvae made a fine addition to our plain meal. When we got moving again, we found our way blocked by a dense thicket. We turned aside and headed for the cane brake near Cape Disappointment. We had not been able to explore as much new ground as I had hoped, and had found no passage through the cliffs. but we did cut a fine bunch of sugar cane. In time, we reached the sledge in Calabash Wood, where we transferred all loads to the sledge and hitched it to our patient donkey. We had no further adventures on the way back to Falconhurst and its joyful welcome. We shared our discoveries over a fine dinner. The boys were interested in the parakeet, but they were especially eager to make candles. With dinner done, we climbed up to our treehouse and pulled in the ladder. The next day, all the boys bounced out of bed talking of nothing but candles. This kept on through breakfast, and I couldn't bear to dampen their enthusiasm. So be it, I said, though in private I was unsure of success. Keeping my doubts to myself, I had the boys put a pot of berries on the fire. A green, sweet-smelling wax began to separate from the berry juice, so we ladled it off into a separate pot next to the fire. When we had enough, we mixed some lard into the hot wax. My wife had prepared some wicks of thick string, which we dipped one after another into the wax to make 2 candles per wick. Fritz hung them on a bush to cool, and we repeated the operation until we had a number of candles about some thickness. This evening we sat up by candlelight for 3 full hours after sunset, enjoying the novelty of Falconhurst bathed in daylight after dark and brilliant light after dark. We were all delighted with the success. "Your cleverness makes me wonder," said my wife. "If you could find a way to make butter every day, I have to throw away a lot of good cream. Can you come up with a plan?" "I think maybe I can," I replied after a little pondering, "though I can't take credit for the method. That comes from the good people of southern Africa. Jack, bring me one of our gourd bottles." He did. I filled it partway with cream and then corked the hole tightly. "Now, get a sail, and you 4 roll the gourd around for half an hour or so while I build us a cart." They obeyed, and half an hour later I looked up from my work and told them to take the gourd to their mother. My good wife's eyes were delighted to see a large lump of fresh butter. "How will you get it all out?" asked Jack. "Heat the gourd in hot water and melt it, of course," said Ernst. In the meantime, Fritz and I finished the cart, which turned out to be a clumsy vehicle but strong enough for our needs. At harvest time, it would be of immense value. My thoughts now went to making Tentholm more secure. I wanted to fortify it with a thick hedge that would stop any wild animal and even discourage potential human attackers. We began to spend our day transplanting thorny bushes and small trees. When that was done, I turned to the soft spot in Tentholm's defenses, Family Bridge. We brought 2 cannon from the wreck and mounted them on small hills nearby. With them we might hold off any enemy, animal or human. This took 6 weeks of hard work, with each Sunday's rest a welcome opportunity to thank God for our continued health and safety. I could see the boys growing stronger. I kept encouraging them to run, leap, climb, and swim. Unfortunately, what built their muscles destroyed their clothes. They looked like beggars, and all my wife's patching could only delay the inevitable. Soon, they would have nothing to wear. It was time to visit the wreck, both to get more clothing and to see how long the ship would last. 3 of the boys and I went off in the pinnace, towing the tub, boat, and raft. Not much had changed aboard the old ship. "Clear her out, boys," I cried. "Get everything of value." Soon there was a great heap of valuables on deck. Sailors' chests, bales of cloth and linen, a couple of small guns, ammunition, tables, benches, window shutters, bolts and locks, barrels of pitch. Several trips later, nothing was left. "One more trip," I said to my wife before we started again. It'll be the last of the old ship. Time to blow her up." "Good riddance," she said. "Then you can never visit her again." Elizabeth was smiling, but a part of her tone was not. As we caught the outbound current, I thought to myself that I'd been very slow to recognize how much she hated our salvage trips. I resolved to be a more perceptive husband. I'd left 2 barrels of gunpowder aboard the wreck. We placed these, lit a slow fuse, and returned to shore to have dinner outside the tent. Shortly after dark, a vivid pillar of fire rose from the black waters, followed a fraction of a second later with a sudden boom. Our good old ship was no more. though we knew it was for the best. We were all a bit sad. What we found the next morning chased away all sadness. The shore was lined with a rich supply of planks, beams, and boards. As we collected these, no small task, my wife came over to announce that 2 ducks and a goose had each raised families among the reeds by the river. Soon they all appeared, waddled past with the tiny ones trailing, happy as could be. Ernst said, "We'll be able to have duck and green pea for dinner some day soon, just like back home." He spoke for us all. The sight of these birds reminded me of our others at Falconhurst. "I'd better check on our flock," I said, and we all went together. On the way I noticed that several of our young trees were considerably bent by the wind. "Tomorrow we'll get bamboo to make supports for them," I announced. "We'll have to go toward Cape Disappointment." As only Fritz and I had seen that country, everyone else wanted to come. The next morning we hitched the cart to the cow and donkey, and we loaded it with all the necessities for a long expedition: tent, food, ammunition, tools, and utensils. It was a lovely morning to show my family the grosbeak nest clusters and wax myrtles. When we had gathered a couple sacks of berries, we stored them in the bushes, marking the spot to pick them up on our return. "Now for the rubber trees, for waterproof boots," I said, looking at Ernst. We arrived, and I showed everyone how to tap the trees and collect the thick sap. This done, we moved through the palm grove and reached a delightful plain. Sugar canes on one side, bamboos and palms on the other, and the shining sea ahead of us. "How beautiful!" exclaimed Jack. "Let's move here." "We would enjoy it very much," I replied, "until a big tiger came out of those woods and pounced on us at night. No, thank you. I much prefer our nest in the tree, or our strong position at tent home. For now, though, we camp here. Boys, pitch the tent." While they obeyed, I unyoked our animals and built a fire. My wife started dinner, while the rest of us split up to cut bamboos and collect sugarcane. When we finished, dinner wasn't quite ready, and the boys were hungry, so they decided to get some coconuts. This time, they got no help from either monkeys or land crabs. The boys gazed longingly up into the trees. "We can climb," said Fritz. Jack and he each rushed to one of the smooth, slippery trunks, but neither got even a quarter of the way up before slipping to the ground. "Here, you young athletes," cried I, holding up some sharkskin leggings I had made earlier. These I tied onto their calves, then put a short loop of rope around each boy and his tree. With the rough sharkskin for traction, the ropes to help them hold their position, both boys quickly reached the treetops. My wife and I watched while they climbed tree after tree, throwing down the best coconuts. Ernst lounged on the grass, gazing up at the palms. When they returned, they needled Ernst about being lazy. He sprang up. "Here, I'll provide you something," he said, putting on a pair of leggings. "Now, please give me a coconut shell," he added. I did so, and he pocketed it and ran to a tree. With surprising agility, he soon reached the top. As he did, Fritz and Jack burst into a roar of laughter. Ernst had climbed a tree that had no coconuts. Their brother drew a knife and sliced off the leafy crest. As it fell, I glanced up at him, surprised at such a display of temper. He smiled down and shouted merrily, "Jack, pick that palm cabbage up and take it to Father. It's only half of my contribution, but it's worth all your coconuts put together." He had made no move to descend. I saw him doing something else with his knife, but could not tell what. He was right. The rare palm cabbage is highly prized in South America for the flavor and nutrition of its leaves. "Bravo!" I cried. "You've made your point. Now come down and we'll thank you. What are you waiting for?" "The second half of my contribution," he replied. "I hope it will be as popular as the first." He stayed in the tree for a short time and then slipped down and presented it to Mother with the coconut shell. "Here, Mother," he said. "Will you please try my wine?" The shell was filled with a clear, rosy beverage, bright and sparkling. My wife tasted it. "Excellent," she said. "To your health, my dear boy." We all had a taste, and Ernst got hearty thanks all around. Dinner was ready at dusk. While we ate, the donkey set up a loud braying, then picked up his ears and galloped off into the bamboos for no apparent reason. We gave chase and set the dogs, but they returned without him. It soon grew too dark to continue the pursuit. What an unpleasant end to our day. Perhaps the near approach of some fierce beast had set off his instincts. I didn't speculate aloud, but I made a very large fire and had my sons sleep with loaded weapons by their sides. We awoke early to greet a bright morning. I rose and looked out, thinking that perhaps our poor donkey might have been attracted by the firelight, but there was no sign of him. We could not afford to lose him, and I determined to track him down if possible. After a quick breakfast, I left my older sons to guard their mother and little brother, and I told Jack to get ready for the march. We took to the trail with the dogs out front. For an hour or more, we followed the donkey's hoof prints, often losing and rediscovering the trail. When we came to a great mishmash of hoof prints, I nearly despaired. It seemed he had joined a herd of some larger animals, and we might never see him again. Jack urged me to continue the search. If we get up a hill, he explained, we may spot the herd. Let's go on, father. Very well, son, I consented. We must find him. At length we reached the edge of a wide plain, with a herd of grazing animals in the distance. Perhaps the donkey had joined them. I decided we should detour through a bamboo marsh to get as close as possible without stampeding the animals. The baboons were huge. Many were 30 feet tall, and a few feet. The bamboos were huge, many over 30 feet tall, and a thick base at the bottom. As we passed through them, I told Jack about the giant bamboos in South America, which the Indians used intact to mast for canoes and cut up to make small barrels. Maybe we should take one home, he suggested. When we reached the grassy meadow, we found ourselves face to face with a herd of buffalo. They looked at us in curiosity, but didn't move. Jack would have fired, but I stopped him. Back to the swamp, I said, and hold back the dogs. We began to retreat, but before we were back in cover, the dogs joined us. In spite of our shouts and efforts to restraint, they dashed forward and seized a big bull buffalo calf. The whole herd had begun to bellow and paw the ground, and then a huge bull led the charge. With no time to take cover, I drew a pistol and fired point blank at the leader. He fell dead at my feet, and the rest halted. Those nearby snuffed the air, then turned tail and galloped across the plain. The dogs were still tussling with the calf, but could not bring the husky young buffalo down. I could think of no way to help them without shooting it, and I preferred not to do that, for a tame buffalo calf might grow up into a fine pack animal. I was about to reload my pistol when clever young Jack came up with a plan. He had brought his bola and some rope. Coming very near the struggle, he threw the bola and made a square hit on the calf's hind legs. His target went down struggling. While I called off the dogs, Jack tied his rope around the legs for a more secure capture. We tied the end to a strong bamboo, and the animal was at our mercy. It was a fine, unhurt calf about the size of Turk. Now, what do we do with him? Asked Jack, watching the poor beast panting on the ground. I'll show you, I said. First, help me tie his forelegs. With the young bull immobile, I had Jack hold his head while I carefully pierced his nose cartilage. I felt badly at this, but had no other option. I was pleased with the small flow of blood quickly slowed to a trickle. I then passed a strong cord through the hole and tied it into a short loop. We freed the young bull and let him up. He was subdued and followed us with no resistance. I now turned to the dead buffalo. I had slain him in self-defense, but disliked leaving him behind. I had no time to skin him, nor could Jack and I carry all the meat. Our new untrained captive might not be so calm with part of one of his former herdmates loaded on his back. So I contented myself with cutting off the tongue and a couple of steaks. I packed these in salt and then let the dogs have the rest. They fell upon it greedily, and we had a restful meal in the shade after our hard work. It was time to return back for camp. On our way through the tall bamboos, we cut down one of the shorter ones. The thicker sections would make fine containers, while those near the top could be used as candle molds. The buffalo's manner was passive enough that I thought we might get him to drag the bamboo and carry some of our burden. This worked, and we pressed on, for Jack was eager to show off his capture. As we crossed a rocky stream, Juno dashed ahead toward a small cave. She was about to run in when a huge snarling jackal sprang out. Turk immediately joined her in the assault. The jackal fought back with great ferocity, but against the two dogs, and together its struggle was doomed. I examined the jackal, a female. Jack, I'm guessing that her pups are close by, perhaps just inside that little cave. I should climb in and get them, suggested my son. Be careful, I cautioned. If the male jackal is in there, we could be in big trouble. We peered into the darkness until Jack was certain it contained only a litter of little yellow jackal pups. He then crept in, followed closely by the dogs, and presently emerged, carrying a handsome yellow puppy about the size of a small cat. This was the only survivor, he explained. Turk and Juno got to them first. I wasn't very sorry, because if Jack had saved them all, he would have wanted to raise them all. One jackal, along with our young bull, was quite enough to add to our menagerie. By the time I reached camp and our family's anxious welcome, it had gotten quite late. The children were delighted at the new animals, though they were all sorry we had lost our poor donkey. Jack was the center of attention and told the story of our capture with great exaggerated boasting that I felt I must step in and give a more factual account. By the time I finished, dinner was ready. Jack and I enjoyed hearing about the camp party's work of the day. Ernst had discovered a sago palm that we could use to make starch. That would be handy for our cooking and our cloth making. With much hard work, he had cut the tree down. Franz and his mother had collected a fine heap of firewood. Fritz had hunted a good bag of game. While they had all been busy, a troop of apes had apparently ransacked the camp. The food was eaten and thrown about, the milk drunk or spoiled, boxes opened, pots and pans dumped over. Everyone had gotten to work immediately, putting the camp back in order. You all did wonderfully, I said. Neither Jack or I would have known if you hadn't told us. After the camp had been put back in order, Fritz had gone down to the shore. Wandering among the rocks at Cape Disappointment, he had found a young eaglet, identified by Ernst as a Malabar eagle. He had put a hood over the bird's head to keep it calm. Maybe you could take up falconry, Fritz, I suggested. If you train him well, he might learn to hunt for us. Everyone was delighted. But it was time for a word of warning. Boys, listen to me. You are collecting a lot of pets. It is not your mother's job to take care of them. Each of you must care for his own animals. If I find one neglected, bird or beast, I will free it on the spot. Remember that. My wife looked greatly relieved, and the boys promised to obey. Before we retired for the night, I smoked the buffalo meat by throwing a lot of green wood onto the fire. When it was thoroughly dry, we secured all the animals. Jack took his little pet in his arms, and we lay down for rest. At daybreak, we made ready to return to Falconhurst. We loaded everything in the cart. As the sun cleared the horizon, we set out. I thought it unfair to the cow to make her haul so much, and with some persuasion managed to get the young buffalo in harness. His strength moved the cart along easily, but we had to take the clearest possible route and could not visit the wax myrtle and rubber trees. I sent Ernst and Jack aside to bring back the sacks we'd left. They had not been gone long when I was alarmed by a terrible animal noise, accompanied by the ferocious barking of the dogs and shouts from Jack and Ernst. My first thought was that some wild beast had attacked. I ran to the rescue. I arrived to quite a scene. My boys were dancing and shouting around a grassy glade, and I too was delighted when I saw why. There lay our old sow with a promising litter of piglets. At first she had squealed and snorted defiance, but was now giving comfortable grunts of recognition. I went back to the cart to get biscuits and potatoes for the happy mother, while Ernst and Jack collected the rubber and candleberries. The sow declined to come, so we returned to Falconhurst without her. The animals were delighted at our return. They looked less eager to see the new pets, especially the eaglet, a predator of the first rank. Fritz, determined to control his pet, chained him by the leg to a tree root and removed the hood. This was a mistake. The bird's savage nature returned with his sight, and he took off the full length of his chain. Before anyone could stop him, he seized the unfortunate parrot and tore it apart. Fritz's anger rose, and he was about to kill the eaglet. "Stop," Ernst said. "Don't kill the poor creature. He's just being an eagle. Give him to me, and I'll tame him." Fritz hesitated, then calmed down. "No, no," he said. "I don't really want to kill him, but I can't give him up. If you can teach me how to tame him, I will give you Nips." "Very well," replied Ernst. "If my plan works, I accept. Take a pipe and tobacco, and blow the smoke around his head. It will make him sleepy, and he won't give you any more trouble." Fritz looked ready to ridicule the plan, but Ernst rarely suggested anything without a good reason. I loaned him a pipe, and he was soon inexpertly puffing away near the struggling eaglet. As each cloud circled round the eagle's head, he became quieter, and soon he sat still. "Excellent!" cried Fritz as he hooded the bird. "Ernst, Nips is yours."